credits and I say, hi there, everyone. My name is Jack Packard.
I'm Darren Mooney.
And I'm Elijah Beahm.
Yes, Elijah, thank you so much for joining us this week. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
I am the columnist at Escapist for Second Look, where I take a second look at many divisive and obscure games, all sorts of odd stuff, and now have the honor of being able to say that, yes, I played a copy of Rambo the video game in 2020, because no one else was going to do it.
Yeah, you just recently got a bunch of ire for not totally disliking a Devil May Cry game, correct?
Yes, apparently liking a game is now a thought crime. Like, it wasn't even like I didn't say anything negative about the rest of the series. It said nothing negative pretty much in general. I even pointed out that it's been stated that because of the changes it did and how that was received actually influenced the design of 5, which all the people who hate the Ninja Theory game love. So it's like everybody pretty much won here. The only person who lost out is someone who vehemently hates DMC Devil May Cry and absolutely loves PlayStation All-Stars because that's the only version of Dante you can play as in that.
Ooh,
that is
true.
the only person in the Venn diagram who lost out.
Well, don't worry here, Elijah. We're going to talk about something that's not divisive at all: Disney and Star Wars.
Yeah. It's great because there's no right answer. If you like the stuff the internet hates, you're terrible. If you hate the stuff the internet likes, you're also terrible. It's amazing.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's right. We are going to get into the Disney Investor Day announcement.
I know. How hot is that?
Oh, it's just the hottest of takes. It took us literally an entire week and a half just to sift through literally every single announcement. Some small talk about the changing face of family television. Then we are going to get into the Batman who says fuck.
The Batman who fucks.
We have to assume that he always did, but now he's gonna say it.
I have an interesting point about that, but we'll come back to that later.
The general talk of Zack Snyder wanting his Justice League cut to be R-rated is the broader picture. And finally, the hottest of news, Tom Cruise yelling at his Mission Impossible crew for not following COVID guidelines. Is he a creep? Was he correct to do it? Yes! Hi and welcome. This is the Escapist Movie Podcast. Doop-a-doop-a-doop-doop. Whop! Just for the audio listeners, I don't do any effects there because that takes time. All right, let's get into our first bit of news business, which is the Disney Investor Day announcement. I always feel like announcements like these definitely need to be taken with a grain of salt. This is very similar to the Apple keynotes where they announce all the amazing things that will come to Apple operating systems, and we only get about 30%. We very similarly with these Investor Day kind of things. Some things happen, some things don't. Schedules changes all the time, and this is more just Disney saying, please keep giving us money. We promise we're going to make you that money back. But what do we have here for Investor Day?
I think, well, first of all, first thing to know about Investor Day, and I kind of love this, is the idea that it managed to get an entire internet full of like nerds, Star Wars fans, and Marvel fans to sit down and watch presentations on Disney's stock portfolio, theme parks, and other brand management properties. There was literally a moment where, like, I can't remember who it was, walking across the screen as a giant, almost like prescription bottle of pills list of kind of like qualifications and warranties and guarantees came up on screen, just to ensure you that the information that you were heard on Disney Investor Day was not legally binding, and that share prices can rise as can fall as well as rise. And I kind of love that, like, the entire internet got so into what was essentially, as you pointed out, a PowerPoint call that is designed to go, keep giving us money, we will give you a dividend back on it. and then it managed to turn into this big kind of event for the internet where it's like, yeah, but there's also a trailer for Loki in there as well. So yeah, let's totally get on board with that. And I find it fascinating how much that kind of, again, this idea of kind of corporate fandom that we've seen emerging, and you've arguably saw it with like things like, to pick an example from last year, remember when Sony and Marvel fell out over the Spider-Man stuff?
Right.
And it was very much like, oh, Disney are the bad guys. Sorry, Disney are the good guys here. Sony are the bad guys here because we want Spider-Man to be in the MCU because he belongs there.
Right.
Or when Disney bought Fox, and the response of, you know, I would argue sane people were, this is a worrying step towards a corporate monopoly. But on the other hand, the internet's reaction was, yeah, but maybe Wolverine will wear his yellow suit this time. And it was like, yeah, okay. And I find it fascinating that like we've reached that stage where investor calls and investor days have become like rooting for your local sports team, where people have flags and hats and are cheering on. And I'm watching it and I'm seeing my Twitter timeline fill with kind of memes where cars labeled Disney Plus are running over pedestrians labeled HBO Max. And I'm wondering, how the hell did we even get here? What's going on?
It was quite a journey. I think like part of this is like how starved we are for the big pop culture moments that, you know, generally speaking, obviously feel about the Marvel movies, the Disney movies, the Star Wars movies, however you want. They are generally speaking big pop culture events that everyone can have a conversation around. And we're very starved for that this year, as many big blockbusters have been pushed back. So part of it is that. Part of it is Disney for years now has been stoking the fires of fandom because that's where they generate their revenue. And we're here now. So you're welcome, Disney, I guess.
Mission accomplished. Look, I'm just really glad that no matter what happens, they've committed to making the Rian Johnson Star Wars trilogy, and there is nothing that will change that. I mean, I don't even need to hear them say on Disney Investor Day that they're going to continue making it. I just know in my heart that it is. And I know that Star Wars fans will welcome it with open arms and enthusiasm and embrace it with all the eagerness in their soul. And that powers me. That gives me warmth, really.
It's true. It's true. Elijah, any deep thoughts on Disney's Investor Day?
Yes. About,
hold on, pregnant pause.
Yeah.
it's like where does it for the Marvel stuff, for me it's like I'm one of the Marvel fans who lapsed a bit after Endgame. It was like, okay, we've hit this huge hill, we've accomplished all these things, and it's like, it looks like a great lineup of stuff. It's amazing to see people like Miss Marvel actually getting live-action TV adaptations and seeing them treat them as a thing where it's like, we're going to treat this very mysteriously and high profile and stuff like that. But Star Wars is kind of fascinating because I was listening to one of your earlier podcasts where you were talking about how, with the most recent season of The Mandalorian, it feels like it's leaning heavily into fan service. And just, the thing is, I completely agree that there's some stuff that's fan service, but in a very roundabout way, some of the stuff that we're seeing happen now with what they're announcing with their new content and everything else was destined to happen a while back. It's actually a consequence. It's a weird comeuppance, because understand, when Disney, way back when the Clone Wars first launched, it was actually pretty controversial because it stomped on a lot of other people's stuff, like a lot of lore and stuff like that, especially the Mandalorians. It broke a lot of things because Lucas basically just told them, oh, do whatever, ignore those other people. Those people who've worked hours and hours don't matter. And it led to a very divisive state for a while for the franchise. And then when Disney bought it up, they were in love with this idea of, oh, we can just throw everything out. And it got to the point that, like, they actively were discouraging bringing back all the old elements, a lot of lore and things that were actually, at that point, structural. They were girders that kept the rest of the universe kind of rolling, are now having to be quickly put back in because after the sequel trilogy and then insisting repeatedly in the infamous, well, we don't have 800-page books to pull from comment, all that sort of stuff has led to, oh, so you're saying we actually need that stuff. So that's why we're getting Dark Troopers. That's and Thrawn suddenly back.
And see, I don't think that's them saying, oh, we actually need that stuff. I'm seeing that as, oh, this is stuff we can sell. Like, wait a minute, we can take the Dark Troopers from this because we can make a toy line out of that. That's all. Like, I see this
or we can convince people who want Dark Troopers to go and play the video game and invest in that. Or we can convince people who are...
There's
Mhm.
absolutely a business. I'm not saying that the business incentive part of it is absent. I'm saying just it's like for a very understand. It was to the point that they actually had someone write a short story that basically was a flip of the bird to another short story from the original Expand universe. It was weird. It was really, really weird. So
Mhm.
it's kind of fascinating to see things turn around now because suddenly now we're on board with recanonizing things and reintegrating things because most hardcore Star Wars fans would have told you a while ago that, yeah, it needed rebooted. The continuity was just too clogged. It needed streamlined, but
Mhm.
they went so hard the other way that they didn't actually look and see that a lot of the stuff that they even introduced that they thought was new already exists. Most of the sequel trilogy already exists as a series of novels that were for kids in the
Mhm.
original expanded universe. Right down to the First Order, the only difference is it was called the Second Imperium. So it's this very weird roundabout situation where they're finally figuring out how this brand works and how to make it work for themselves. And it's just sort of fascinating because for the longest time there was this insistence that they didn't need a lot of the stuff that kept the franchise relevant all this time. And I'm really, really curious to see how they go forward with that because if they're going to lean hard into this stuff now, then that's going to actually have an impact on future creative endeavors. So it's all up in the air right now, but I was not expecting to see nearly as much stuff coming back. Like Rogue Squadron being the next major movie is not something I was expecting. I was expecting
Mhm.
either it was going to be the Rian Johnson thing or they were going to have some new High Republic thing that they were going to roll out, and they are going to have that with the Acolyte, but and as Darren said, that things have been in flux. That's also been made very clear because originally the High Republic was supposed to apparently be introduced with a video game that no longer exists and may have been the canceled Project Viking, I believe that's the name it was, that DICE was working on, but we're only given a year and a half to try and make a full sandbox RPG sort of thing, so that got canceled not
Mhm.
too long into development.
And yeah, like to me, like them understanding their brand is the problem. Like, just from from a viewer standpoint, like comparing and contrasting season 1 and season 2 of The Mandalorian, like just as a starting off point here. Season 1 seemed to take those lovely Star Wars elements but still exist within their own world, whereas season 2, from my perspective, has been nothing but setting up the branching series. Oh, here's a Katie Sarkoff Mandalore series. Here's the Ahsoka series. Here's this character who's
More
gonna go off and
Cara
do.
Dune, who's going to presumably be the Ranger of the High Republic, presumably.
And
Where
so
she'll probably insist that Palpatine would have won if not for voter fraud. Um,
exactly. And so
sorry,
like,
sorry.
oh no, get there. It's fine now. Everything's fine now.
Um,
The so like to me, the brand management of Star Wars has overtaken the storytelling of Star Wars, and I see that as a degradation problem, that or an entropy problem, if you will. Whereas they are going to coalesce. Whoop, hit my microphone. They are going to coalesce their fan base and have a steady stream of fans, but it will no longer be the big experience that those of us who were maybe just on the fringes of Star Wars fandom could still enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I can see that. I can definitely see that, and that is a concern for me too, especially because yeah, it's there's a lot of Dave Filoni characters all getting stuff, and then that's just it's like that's a lot for one person to have sway over all of this expanded universe, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna be honest here. I was actually kind of worried that was gonna happen in season one, so I was amazed to see it didn't happen until season two because now with Star Wars: The Bad Batch, it's like, oh yeah, Fennec Shand. We're just gonna show her in the trailer, and we're gonna just put all this other stuff in there and all that,
Mhm.
and oh gosh,
Yeah, no, and like Filoni, who is essentially now the voice piece for George Lucas, who has completely drunk the entirety of the Star Wars Kool-Aid. I have seen some of his like defenses of what I believe
the
are the
Phantom
worst
Menace.
part. Yeah. Oh my lord. Which is,
But not only that, it's a bad defense of like the Phantom Menace. There's like there are arguments we made that the Phantom Menace.
Good. I'm actually in the company of people who also find it because, like, I understand the Clone Wars forced one of my favorite authors out of the expanded universe. She literally just quit writing Star Wars books entirely because they basically shoved her into a corner. So for years, I have felt very conflicted because, like, there's stuff the Clone Wars does well, but whenever it tried to adapt anyone else's ideas, it did not go well.
I mean, okay, here's my crazy, slightly controversial Star Wars like opinion-y thing, which is I know, because Jack and I have talked on the podcast before about Star Wars and about the acceptance that Star Wars fans have things that are new, particularly after The Empire Strikes Back. Because when you had Return of the Jedi, it's like, let's do the original Star Wars again, and then you've arguably had a kind of a template where everything that was new in Star Wars has met a very strong pushback, and everything that is similar in Star Wars has met a pushback, but arguably less of a pushback, making it more palatable. And this is where things get interesting, right? Because I would argue the early Disney stuff, and it's a very nebulous concept, this early Disney stuff, so I'm gonna pick from across the timeline, but say The Force Awakens, which is transparently a remake of A New Hope, right down to, oh look, it's a secret Jedi living on a desert planet, and oh, she's going to discover that she is going to be the chosen one, and she's got a mystery around her parentage, and oh my god, there's a villain who wears a mask, but he's also possibly working as a servant for some sort of like emperor type figure in some sort of like vaguely Nazi-esque organization. I wonder what that could be about. Oh my god, he's not actually a British actor this time, but there's an Irish actor, and he's very strongly sending Nazi vibes. He's like Bernie. Let's call him like the Anglo-Irish actor. He's sending like, it's like, The Force Awakens is like Star Wars, but at least kind of like put the vaguest, newest coat of paint on it.
They put a polish on it, absolutely.
That's it exactly. Yeah. And I would argue the same thing happened with the first season of The Mandalorian, where it's like, hey, you remember IG-88, right? Well, here's IG-11. And I hope I haven't mixed those two up now, I'm worried.
Oh, no, you got it right.
Yeah, but basically, IG-11 is like IG-88. He looks exactly like him, and he's as cool as the action figure was, but he's a different character, and he's got his own personality, and he's got his own arc in there. Or, hey, here's a wretched hive of scum villainy, but it's not Mos Eisley. It's a different desert planet. And, it's a different guild of bounty hunters that they're working on. And, that sort of stuff. And Cara Dune, she's not Han Solo. She's just another type of disillusioned figure existing at the margins and playing with archetypes. And my issue or concern is that, like, we've reached the point where instead of that abstract cannibalism, where instead of saying, let's take the elements that people like in Star Wars stories, and as Jack put a new coat of polish on them, give them a new face, cast a new actor, have them play a similar narrative role, we've literally just reached a point where instead of doing that, we say, well, actually, in that case, then why wouldn't we just throw away this new one and just take the old action figure? Instead of having, like, The Mandalorian, where he's a guy who looks like Boba Fett, and he wears Boba Fett's armor, but he's a different character. He's a much more, I would argue, a much more interesting character. Sorry, Boba Fett fans. But he's a much more compelling character in his own right. He actually has an arc. He actually has a personality, but he looks just like Boba Fett, and he follows the code of Boba Fett, and he brings in all this other stuff that fans have kind of associated with Boba Fett, and is interesting. Or you have Baby Yoda, who is Yoda, but a baby, but also is its own character with its own motivations and its own kind of arc. And it's like, okay, these are familiar enough that fans can get on board with them, but they're also distinct enough that, like, Favreau as writer can do what he wants with them and do interesting things with them. Right. And my worry... okay.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but it's
go for
it. The thing is, I'm fully on board with that, and that's actually why I was like, when I did see the Dark Troopers being added, it was like, okay, they're not just going to jam them in exactly like before. It's going to be something different, because that is a lot of on the popular loud screen, there's going to be a lot of people who are very aggressively against ever shaking things up with Star Wars, but I know that there are also fans, myself among them, who are like, yes, please do something new, do shake some things up. You can do more than Knights of the Old Republic too. You can have other things that also shake things up. We can have more stuff like The Last Jedi, but my concern is the Lucasfilm Story Group has been publicly known to discourage reincorporating certain elements, and it's led to a problem where people come up with new characters, but they essentially end up serving so much of the same role that it's actually a problem. Like most recently, in the mainline comics, Natasi Dela is back. She has a different name. They slightly changed her backstory, but it's Natasi Dela. And there's basically nothing else changed about there except they took more of the interesting stuff out.
For those of us who don't know who Natasi Dela is...
Natasi Dela was Grand Admiral Tarkin's essentially kind of girlfriend who used him to leapfrog up into the Imperial officery and later would lead the Ma installation, where a lot of the Empire's most advanced weapons were developed, and
Okay.
was basically for a while isolated from it, didn't find out about the fall of the Empire, found out about it, did not take it well that Leia Organa and Luke Skywalker had effectively killed her boyfriend, and kind of went on a rampage for a bit.
So
But
she's like Empire evil scientists lady.
Oh, very, very much like,
Great.
and the thing is, she's become just a kind of a general mad scientist because she saved the day at one point in one of the other book series because of just how many they literally call her fleet the Ma Irregular Fleet because they're using ships from like over 30 years ago, but they're doing things that no one could have imagined possible.
Mm-hmm.
And
And now there's a character in the comics who is very similar to her,
serves
but
that
with
function.
a different name.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you.
And that's kind of the issues that we've had a lot of characters like that. Plus, sometimes a character might be doing something new. Like there's Yvonne Verlaine, who the Princess Leia miniseries comic that came out brand new, one of the first things they put out from Marvel, was really good, explored a lot of hard-hitting themes for Star Wars, and they set Verlaine up like she was going to become the next Queen of Alderaan, because Leia realized, I'm going to be fighting a war. I can't do this. Then Gary Whitta in Star Wars Aftermath, the second one in the trilogy, I believe, brought her back, and she's just still a fighter pilot. Completely dropped the whole bit about her becoming a queen, completely dropped all this character development, and if anything, has Leia basically pull rank to get a favor out of her. And it's just like the insistence that because it's all one tier of canon and that everything happens in one space has typically resulted in things being both very conservative with trying new things and also a lot of odd inconsistencies and redundancies that just from someone who actually keeps track of the lore, it's been very, oh my gosh, it'd be so easy to fix this. It would be like literally you could take a weekend and fix most of these inconsistencies.
They just don't care that much because everything keeps selling, and to me this is like the bigger issue with Disney in general and Star Wars and Marvel specifically, which is it doesn't matter because they have already coalesced their base. Sure, there's inconsistencies. Is that going to stop you from buying and reading the books? Heck no.
Are you going to unsubscribe from Disney Plus? No, you're not.
No, you need it. You need it.
Then they weaponize. Like, I love that they when I say I love, I kind of like I'm awe-inspired in a biblical sense that they weaponize this stuff. Because I remember when like The Mandalorian was going to premiere, and it was like there will be an earth-shattering spoiler in the opening episode of The Mandalorian, and like in my day we just called that a plot. But like it very much kind of like designed to weaponize the idea of Star Wars fans needing to watch this on the day, and the same thing with continuity, where like we talked about, I think when we talked about The Mandalorian, where it's like, oh, you don't know who Ahsoka is, you don't know who Grand Admiral Thrawn is. Jump in the deep end, keep your Disney Plus subscription, even though we got no Star Wars content until we get to like Rangers of the New Republic or until we get to Ahsoka, and just binge on the Clone Wars, which is fascinating. I'm really glad Elijah's on because I actually have thoughts about things like this, about canon and continuity. Mm-hmm. And like Elijah is very much a Star Wars person. I am more of a Star Trek person, and I have to admit, as somebody who's like thought perhaps far too much about continuity and canon, I have I know never, right, Jack? I have a huge soft spot for, and I think Elijah's right about the problem being one tier of canon. I think you have massive problems when everything is special because nothing is. But also because, as you point out, it encourages people to be conservative, because if you do something wrong on that level, it causes blowback and it explodes, and you've ruined not necessarily everything, but you've ruined that little corner of everything. And I'm a big fan of the idea of canon as it existed in Star Trek in, say, the 70s, where you just licensed the fuck out of it. And you just basically, like, said, Bantam, write a comic book series. Gold Key, write a comic book series. Write a series of tie-in novels, pocketbook. Let's do some comics with DC. It'll be great. Let's do some audio plays. We've got a vinyl disc. Let's get Leonard Nimoy to record on it. And none of it has to be reconcilable with the other stuff, because, like, that's just going to impede your creativity. And who has time to read, like, 60 Gold Key comics and 70 DC comics? And, like, what you do at the end is you sift through it and you go, that's a good idea, I'll take it. That's a good idea, I'll take it. That will never work outside of prose, but I like it, so let's stick a reference and a script to it. I don't know. Like, that, like, treat it as a playground, and, like, treat it as expansive and have... Yeah, and, like, do stuff that you can do. And this is the thing about, like, tie-in media, which I love, and kind of... as somebody who is like really geeky and who is really into this stuff, what I loathe about this era of content and canon and continuity is it's the conservatism that Elijah mentioned, which is you will never be allowed to do the stuff that people did in like 70s Star Trek writing, where you could do stuff like John M. Ford, fantastic novelist. He wrote a Star Trek musical. And published it, and it's glorious. It's How Much for Just the Planet, and like in that, Scotty plays a round of golf against the Klingons to determine mining rights on this like little hunk of rock, and it's a musical, and it's like nobody would ever greenlight that. Nobody would allow that to be published today in a comic, but it's brilliant, and I want more like that. And I mean, you also get little things that are actually important. Like I think that Sulu and Uhura first got their first names. They didn't get their first names on television or in the movies. They got them in the novels because the novel writers were like, isn't it a bit weird that Sulu and Uhura don't have first names? We should probably give them first names. And then people reading them went, that's a good idea. Let's put them in the movies. Like that's the kind of stuff that I miss about like old-fashioned like shared universe, and which I feel gets lost when we do this brand synergy, like vertical integration management stuff, perhaps.
Well, but it's not just brand synergy, vertical integration. It's, you've used the word weaponize.
Yeah.
It is.
Sorry, that was very accusatory. Yes.
No, I think it's perfect.
Utilize, perhaps.
The thing that Disney is banking off of, the reason that Disney has bought all of these, the reason that Disney is in the business of intellectual properties is because of the modern internet era.
Yeah.
Because they want a YouTube video that'll get a few million views explaining all the lore, going into the tiny details. They want 1,000 YouTube channels to dissect every episode because that keeps the feedback loop churning.
And points you to things you can buy as well, because it's like,
Exactly.
oh, well, if you want to know how Boba Fett survived the Sarlacc pit, slight spoiler alert, I hope everybody's up to date on The Mandalorian, but let's say Boba Fett did survive the Sarlacc pit. If you want to see how, well, here we have a novel that you can buy or a comic you can buy that will cover it for you.
Yeah,
And
that's
so- I guess just to wrap up my thought here, which is like the reason we can't, we can, but they never will allow people to play is because that will end the feedback loop, and Disney in particular, and most companies dealing with intellectual property never want to lose the safe bet. We want to keep the canon going, keep the machine going, no matter the cost. And to finalize my very downer thought is eventually entropy will take place and everyone won't care.
I'll get back to Elijah in a second here, but I mean, I would point out that, I would argue like the golden age for the the Star Trek expanded universe, and based on my, again, admittedly less sure knowledge of the Star Wars expanded universe, and Elijah can back me up here, was probably the period where it seemed like Star Trek or Star Wars had gone away for good and was never going to be a thing with a central through line. It was the long gap between the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, if I remember correctly, or in Star Trek. Oh, okay. Is that fair? Is it?
Sorry, I would say there was some expansion there between the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. Plus, Lucas didn't have quite the money he wanted to. Otherwise, Shadows of the Empire would be a movie.
Yeah.
But the really
things like
big...
the Throne trilogy and kind of things like the
because like there was a rough period at the very start where a lot of things didn't come together, but then after Thrawn there was some momentum, and then there was the Vong, which got things really rolling, and then when the Clone Wars era exploded, because before the CGI show they had everyone coordinate and it actually worked. Like they even had a medical drama series going alongside battle stories and hardline things about commandos. Like they were tapping into all sorts of stuff. There's even a surprisingly heartfelt story about Anakin meeting another Jedi who's also secretly married and having to be like, okay, so you know what it's like for this too? It was crazy.
Right. It's good. But that fed, right? Like that fed, and now we're stuck in a feedback loop. Which is our problem. So yes, which is the problem that I feel like we are in, is there is nothing adding to the feedback loop. They are just trying to sustain it by saying, oh, this character now this character definitely is related to this character, and this character is kind of like this character. Just keep the feedback loop going.
We haven't talked about much of the other announcements during Disney Investors Day, and we can go back to Star Wars in a moment if Elijah and yourself want. But I think that it's a nice segue to talk about one of the more interesting announcements, which is the reverse intellectual propertization of Buzz Lightyear, which is one of the most surprising and interesting announcements
Still don't know how to
of
feel about
the
that.
slate. It's amazing. Like no, but it's very like it's what we're talking about here, which is the idea that everything is like subsidiary to product. Everything flows into or out of the river of product. So it's like now, for listeners who are not aware, Pixar announced that they are making a Buzz Lightyear Space Command movie that will star Chris Evans as an actual human being, Buzz Lightyear, who, and this is where it gets beautiful, is the inspiration for the toy Buzz Lightyear, voiced by Tim Allen in the Toy Story movies. Now, keep in mind, obviously, like, in the Toy Story movies, Woody was an intellectual property derivatory character coming off the back of Woody's Roundup, and that was very clever. I thought that was handled very, very well in Toy Story 2, but I find it interesting that we've literally reached a point where we are reverse engineering, so the characters that were originally distinct and unique are now, even within their own universe and within our universe as a secondary concern, now like byproducts of movies that we're making so they can be byproducts of, which I find fascinating and terrifying. And I'm sure it'll be great because I like Chris Evans. I think Pixar make good movies, but
no, but
I was
that's
like,
the world. That's the world they live in. So that's where they're drawing inspiration from. Also, like just on a technical level, apparently Tim Allen is incredibly difficult to work with. So finally having an excuse to part with him, I think, is a really agreeable thing for Disney.
yeah, because you know that if they did the Woody Roundup movie, it would still be Tom Hanks.
Of course, everybody
yeah.
loves Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks is great, but Tim Allen is notoriously a prick on movie sets. Rumor. That's all rumor. By the way,
I'm glad you're saying it, not I am. I don't want to get drawn into this Tim Allen defamation lawsuit, which I'm sure he wouldn't file because I'm sure he's a lovely guy. I'm distancing myself from Jack very effectively.
Allegedly. If you say it 3 times, no lawyer can pass. And so, but you know, and we're now seeing it also keeping with the Disney theme. We're seeing that on the Marvel front, which is like they have finally like gotten all of their pieces, all of their toys in one place, and they're setting up the pieces. There's a probability that Charlie Cox is going to be in the Spider-Man universe playing his Matt Murdock character.
Wait,
along.
That's happening?
Oh, he's appearing. We don't know if Daredevil is, but he's appearing.
Okay, because I thought he denied that. So this is news for me.
No, he is.
It was rumored about a year ago, and now it's been apparently, I think, confirmed.
And of course, you know, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield have cameo appearances. Like they are getting all of their ducks in a row to make sure that anything popular is sustained within the feedback loop.
Yeah, Willem Dafoe is going to be in there, and I'd like to imagine that he's going to read every part in the movie just in a mirror at a canted angle, because I really want that to happen. Alfred Molina's in there. I'm really disappointed that like Topher Grace isn't back, but apparently Sandman is, which is interesting. I would kind of love it if it's like we can't bring Tom Hardy into the movie because he's in like, you know, Venom, and that's kind of like our vaguely kind of sassy adult Sony property. So let's just bring in Topher Grace again because people love that, right?
But no, like that's the thing. They choose the pieces that sell well, and they discard the pieces that don't. They're agnostic towards Tom Hardy because that's a different company and won't make them any money.
Yeah.
It's the further down the line we get with Disney, the more apparent their own financial cynicism is. And I understand that movies are a business, but it also used to be a business of entertainment, not just intellectual property.
Easy there, you commie.
Are you trying to imply that there are people telling a story in these movies? The story is the CGI.
Creative arts, eh?
I am implying that stories historically lead to profit. Good stories lead to profit. So maybe let's keep the profitable thing, not, you know, like they're conflating story with character. And
What and
Ugh.
it is actually, when you mention this, actually it's worth noting, like they announced the dates for the Marvel live action shows, including obviously WandaVision, including Falcon and the Snowman. No, sorry, apologies, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That's a David Bowie song. It's a great David
Did-
Bowie song,
would
and a
would
movie
you like
starring
to
Sean Connery.
build a Winter Soldier?
Yeah. And obviously Loki. And what's interesting is if you look at the arrangement or scheduling of those, they are basically running straight through, I believe, the middle of April. And you can see very clearly that like Disney have got 89 million subscribers worldwide to Disney Plus. And what happened last time, and again, this is all voodoo, nobody actually knows, all you have is social media analytics, but there was some suggestion that like last year The Mandalorian was released coming up to Christmas, huge surge in Disney Plus subscriptions. The Mandalorian ended, a slightly small shallow dip in Disney Plus subscriptions because people were like, well, there's nothing new on the service I want to watch. And you could tell that this year it's very much like, well, don't worry, we have plenty of content. As soon as The Mandalorian is over, just in time for Christmas, you'll hop off that and hop on to WandaVision. As soon as WandaVision's over, we'll go to Falcon and Winter Soldier. And as soon as that's over, we'll hop you directly onto Loki. And this is one of the things that I find interesting looking at the layout of kind of the Disney landscape. And I suspect, and again, this is a terrible thing to say in the environment that we're in, but the current crisis in which we are existing has arguably been something of a massive boon for Disney, because they were already in the process of transitioning towards streaming. And I think they said that like Disney Plus was their priority. Streaming was where they saw the future being. And it's interesting that like, and Elijah mentioned this after Endgame, as a Marvel fan, it's like, Endgame, I'm done, I'm out. That's enough, I'm gorged. There is a sufficiency, an ample sufficiency of enoughness that I have kind of enjoyed. But it is interesting that like after that, you had basically the second generation of Marvel heroes. The idea of people taking up the mantle of existing heroes, in particular, say Falcon becoming Captain America, or
Right.
Ironheart, the black girl Riri Williams, who will take the role of Iron Man. Not to, sorry to spoil anybody who hasn't been reading comics. I suspect that's what's going to happen. We don't know for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say
But-
this has happened like years ago in
the
comics
comics,
world,
yeah.
so it's
Or-
hard to know where
yeah.
spoilers fall.
Yeah,
Right.
or like Lady Thor, the kind of Jane
Right.
Foster character. Again, apologies to anybody who hasn't read the Jason Aaron run, but like, let's face it, they announced it at Comic-Con. It's not really a spoiler. But like the idea,
Read the comic.
Yeah, it's like I think she has a very interesting character and storyline. I agree.
Yeah.
It's really weird, by the way, that her official name is Lady Thor, even though her actual name is just Thor.
Yeah.
So I always found that to be a little upsetting.
Yeah,
But sorry, go ahead, Dave.
it's like italicized lady ! Thor, just so you can distinguish her from like male Thor, man Thor.
Right, exactly.
Man Thor sounds like a euphemism for what Nathan Fillion would describe as his penis being the hammer. But anyway, we will get back to deep cut reference there for anyone who got it. I'm glad that you did. But anyway. Anybody get that? Anybody
sing-along fans got that reference, absolutely.
But my point is, though, right? So what you had with Endgame the kind of wrapping up of the MCU, and you had this interesting thing happen where you got a diversification of the main characters, where like Captain America was going to be a black man, Iron Man was going to be a young black girl, Thor was going to be a woman. And what I think is interesting is that when that happened, it looked like they were being shunted onto the streaming service as a secondary concern. It's like, what, Anthony Mackie's not going to get his own trilogy of Captain America movies. Riri Williams isn't going to get her own Iron Man movie. Thor is still going to get her own movie because like the Thor franchise peaked with number 3 and Taika Waititi wants to make it, so let's just let him do that anyway. But I find it interesting that like the situation that we're in with the pandemic means that while it might initially have looked like they were a secondary concern or they were shunted down or being shuffled off stage, it's really great that it's like, no, this is where it's happening. Like, this is where the future is now. This is like where the priority is. And all of a sudden, your African-American Captain America is going to be on your primary mode of watching. Your young black Iron Woman, basically, or Ironheart, is going to be on Disney Plus, which is where all this action's happening. And I find it like fascinating that happened. That like something outside of Disney's control effectively reshuffled it so that the heart of their brand ended up being this incredibly diverse lineup of kind of heroes. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. That's a great wrap up then. There was nothing more to add. We think it's interesting. We've talked a lot about streaming versus movie theaters in general, so I'm done with that. Let's move on to speaking of a diverse group of heroes, what's more diverse than a superhero swearing? That was a bad transition, but hey, it's what I got. We're now going to jump from Marvel to DC. Zack Snyder gets more money to make something literally no one wants, which is a very long R-rated version of Justice League. And I say literally no one, I want it, but I also, for fun, watch terrible, terrible movies. And so, like, I wanted to watch a 4-hour terrible movie. I can't imagine the general population wanting this. Zack Snyder has said he is hoping for an R rating. I don't think it matters because it's on HBO Max. They probably don't care. Sorry, Darren, you go right ahead.
No, this is my favorite detail of this. My absolute favorite fucking detail of this story. And it's great. I can swear because it's an R-rated segment. But, like, we're having this big thing happen at the moment. We talked about it last week with the HBO, like, streaming versus theatrical stuff. And it's all like, all our movies are going to be released on, like, streaming on the same day they're released in theaters. And you have Christopher Nolan getting upset. You have, like, Denis Villeneuve getting upset. You have, like, Legendary threatening to sue. And in the middle of this, you have Zack Snyder, who initially seemed like this was just going to be a streaming release. Initially seemed like it was going to be, first of all, a streaming movie. Then it was going to be a 4-part streaming miniseries. And now, I love this. I adore this. I'm gonna. You know what I'm gonna say? It's gonna be fantastic. Apparently, there's a process underway where he believes that it is highly, highly, highly likely that his 4-hour R-rated cut of Justice League will get a limited theatrical release. Tell me that's not the most 2020 news you've ever heard.
That is amazing. Not in a good way, but that is amazing.
Inspiring in a biblical sense. No, I mean, look, obligatory thing here where I say I don't hate the Snyder movies as much as other people do. In fact, I actually like the version of Justice League that was released in cinemas is one of the worst films I've ever seen because it lacked any vision or purpose. At least Snyder's film, at least Snyder's films are saying something. Like, at least they have a at least they have like a clear perspective and they know what they're doing.
There's no question.
Yeah, vision is a strong word, but yes, they have a very clear perspective, like visionary.
A perspective, yeah, we can all agree on that. Right?
Yeah, like they're clearly they are clearly articulate. And again, like I know, like they're not great, although I do think Batman versus Superman is at least a very interesting addition to the superhero genre, and I'm glad that it exists because it does a whole bunch of stuff that makes people very uncomfortable with superheroes, and I think it's occasionally worth making people very uncomfortable with superheroes. And like, come on, tell me that you watching Batman versus Superman and didn't feel uncomfortable. Come on, tell me that you felt comfortable.
No, I felt nothing but joy. Again,
Really?
For fun, I like bad movies, and Batman versus Superman was so bad that I had a great time. Its internal logic is absolutely batshit crazy.
Which is great because now they can say that because it's R-rated. And have Batman in it.
Right. No, I think as a filmmaker, as a director, Zack Snyder is a very good director. He gets the exact movie that he wants.
Yes.
That is
I don't ever doubt that what I see on screen is what Zack Snyder wants to be there. Which is something that happens, like, I mean, when we watch movies these days, there's a lot of, I can see that that's there because the studio said it had to be there, or because the director thought that it was the easiest way to do it, or because they saw someone else do it a different way. With Snyder, at least, I mean, it's not what I would do, but it's definitely what he would do, and I kind of, I admire that on some level, to be honest.
And so it's like objectively, as objective as you can get with film criticism, Zack Snyder is a good director because he gets
Would you go so far as to say as objectivistly as you can, given that rumors of him working on an Ayn Rand adaptation?
Perfect, Darren.
Thank you.
That being said, his movies are bad. His movies are very, very bad, structurally, tonally. The way he has mishandled adaptations is something for the film textbooks of the future. I personally feel, and now we get an. Where are you? Okay, sorry, my dog was sniffing at me. She's given up and laid down, which is great.
She has accepted the R-rated 4-hour cut of Justice League.
She's gonna be so excited because we won't leave the couch, and that's where she likes us. But to me, all this is Zack Snyder kind of like going hard on the thing that makes him, if not popular, at very least talked about, which is how he massively mishandles his adaptations. And that makes him very controversial in the film sphere. That means a lot of people are making YouTube videos about his movies and then rebuttals to those YouTube videos and articles about the rebuttals about the YouTube video. It keeps his name up there. And so what I feel like is this is just someone who like found like something that makes him popular and he's going harder on it because now that's his career, you know?
I
So
don't,
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know. I tend to like, again, this is one of the things where I've talked to people who've interviewed Snyder, and their response is, and again, this is not necessarily something that is a compliment or an insult. It is just a statement, to be absolutely clear. But they have tended to say in interviewing Snyder as a film director, he is a man who is exactly as you might imagine him to be, in that he does not seem like a man who has wiles or subtext. So I would be hesitant to suggest that there is this very clever four-dimensional game of chess going on. I would tend to guess that he's doing this because he enjoys it.
I'm not implying cleverness here. I just think he knows, like, oh no, this is what keeps my name in the papers and gives me money. Like, that's not clever. Sorry, Elijah. Go ahead.
I feel like it's a bit that, but it's also kind of like the Paul W.S. Anderson, Mila Jovovich thing with the Resident Evil film franchise and with the new Monster Hunter movie coming out, where Anderson and Jovovich are a husband and wife team who are just having a ball making ridiculous popcorn flick fanfic movies. And let's face it, the way that Alice is integrated into Resident Evil is very much like I've inserted a Mary Sue character into this fanfic and I'm going to just have a ball with it. And I feel like on some level that's sort of what it is like for Snyder too, that he gets to play with these action figures that no one else ever gets to, and he is having the time of his life getting to do what he wants to do. And on some level I think that's part of the reason why it doesn't faze him as much when he gets so much blowback for all of his things, and that's what makes it easier for him to just keep going harder on that, because it's like, oh well, you don't like that, well I'm gonna do something even crazier now.
I mean, like, again, to give Snyder a bit of credit here, like, we have had God knows how many superhero movies at this point, and like, and again, this is the thing where we talk about Marvel and it tends to be derisive. It's like, you know exactly what you can get with a Marvel movie, and that's not always a bad thing. Like, sometimes you want that. And sometimes you end up with stuff that is majestic, stuff like, say, Logan, or kind of Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, I'd argue. Stuff like Into the Spider-Verse, which is transcendental. But I also think that, like, within the superhero genre, there's room for things that look absolutely like nothing else. And I think, like, without, again, no value judgment here, which feels like a qualification that I'm adding a great deal to this discussion, but Snyder's movies unreservedly look like nothing else but Snyder's movies. Snyder's version of Batman and Superman look and feel nothing like anything but his version of those characters. And it's like, we've already had how many Batman movies over the years? We've had, like, Burton's take, we've had Nolan's take, we've had the 60s series, we've had the animated series, which is arguably the best adaptation of them all. We're going to get the Pattinson or Battinson version later on as well. When that ends, or that trilogy ends, we're going to get another version after that. So I don't tend to get as upset as some fans do, that it's like, well, here is a version of Batman that does not necessarily conform to my ideal of the character.
Oh yeah.
Or,
Yeah, like, I feel like that's even part of the problem that's actually been afflicting Disney in general. And I'm not trying to double dip here, just like, especially with the Star Wars stuff, again, because of the whole flat continuity thing and stuff like that. Again, it's like, if you're only going to have one timeline, if you're going to just shut out any other possibility, that tends to get your fans a lot more riled than, here's the timeline for people who like this, here's the timeline for people who like that. And DC has fully embraced that, like with Joker and the Harley Quinn movie. It's like,
Shazam.
It's a multiverse.
Yeah. Different flavors for everybody. Like, I really, really, really profoundly dislike the Aquaman movie, but I know that there are people for whom the Aquaman movie is their jam. And I'm really happy.
It's me.
Well, I'm really happy for you, Jack. I'm really glad that you got that. Like, it makes me happy when I see people who are like, I love the Aquaman movie, and I'm like, I don't, and I have reasons for that, but I'm glad that you do. Which one of us is the poorer for that, Jack? It's not. Yeah. It's not you.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, and I guess, like, that's like my contempt. Like, one, just as a filmmaker, I feel like he is trying. I feel like as a filmmaker, it's very important for him to convey a message that he conveys very poorly and is not suited for the material. Two, I feel like he, for the entirety of his superhero career, has what do you say, has taken his ball and gone home. No, you know, we haven't gotten a Batman movie without him in these last however many years, right?
But,
Like,
well, okay, well, since 2012, which is only like 8 years, to be fair.
8
Like,
years.
in the
Right.
grand
Unless you
scheme
count
of
the
things,
animated stuff, which has actually been
That's
very
it.
good. There's been a really
Yeah, like-
solid animated output.
and
Oh,
the
sure.
Lego Batman movie as well, which was 2017, or the Gotham TV show, or the Batman movie, which I think was really supposed to release, was it this year or next year, but it's going to be pushed to 2022. Like,
Right.
I don't think we're suffering from a dearth of Batman content because he's taken his ball and gone home. I think Superman, maybe you have a case with, but even then you have the CW stuff that's happening as well. And, like, you have things like Brandon Routh wearing the costume again in, like, CW's Crisis
was
on
so
Infinite
good.
Earths.
That's right.
Yeah, so I mean,
fun.
I like, that's the thing. I feel like, and again, this is one of those things where I worry that it sounds like I'm being partisan. Like, objectively, Marvel and Disney are doing this better because they are getting more of the money. And, because they are, on average, probably their quality baseline is probably a bit better overall. But, like, I feel that if you have a range of products, exactly what Elijah said, it's like one flavor. And it's like vanilla. And it's like, I like vanilla. I like French vanilla. I think French vanilla is amazing. But sometimes I like strawberry or mint chocolate chip or cookie dough. I don't really get what rum and raisin's about, but that probably works for somebody. So I'm glad that they have rum and raisin. I'm kind of glad that it exists. And, like, that's the thing, is that, like, I feel like for Superman, like, the Brandon Routh version of Superman who came back in the CW, not my cup of tea. And we can talk, if we ever get to talking about, Superman Returns, I have, like, a thing on that. We'll date rapist, deadbeat dad, nostalgia Superman is not my jam. To be absolutely clear.
We can do a one-off episode.
We'll do a one-off episode on that.
Absolutely.
But if he's your jam, that's great. He's there for you. But also, like, the Tyler Hockner version that's going to be has appeared in Supergirl and will be appearing in Superman and Lois Lane. If he works for you, that's great. But also, if, like, the Henry Cavill version works for you, that's great as well. I don't feel like there's a dearth there. It's not like, say, Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, where this is the only Iron Man you are going to get for 12 years. It's like, no, there are multiple choices there. It's like a Spider-Man. There's one every 3 minutes.
That's very true. And I guess, like, to me, then it falls onto the other part, which is, I think, as a filmmaker, he insults me. I think he insults me as a filmmaker. And I don't, and like the amount of serious, like, he takes himself very seriously. His fans take himself very seriously, which I know is like a whole different conversation, which is like dealing with people who are his fans on the internet. Ugh. Yeah. And so, and knowing a tiny bit of behind the scenes that his agent is best friends with the head of development at Warner Brothers, which is possibly how he got all these movies in the first place. It's like there is a side of him as a filmmaker that is incredibly insulting to my artistic sensibilities. My nerd sensibilities are also insulted by how he mishandles his properties. And he's an objectivist, and therefore is insults my liberal sensibilities.
Moral sensibilities,
yes,
perhaps.
exactly.
What I'd always heard about him getting the job, and again, this is something where it's like sometimes good processes and good systems have outputs that we don't necessarily agree with, but we just have to accept. The argument that I always heard was that it was basically Warner Brothers as a result of 300, basically doing gangbuster business as an R-rated movie, but also gangbuster business as an R-rated movie in March, which was conceived a dead zone up until that point, is basically what bought him all that credit with Warner Brothers, because Warner Brothers are a studio that always favors their directors and will always go back to their directors even after financial failures. Notably, like, we pick an example now, like a good example, because let's accept that maybe Snyder's a bad example here, but let's pick a good example, which is Ava DuVernay after A Wrinkle in Time, which bombed at the box office, was a financial failure. It was basically the end of her as a filmmaker at Walt Disney Studios, because that's how Disney operate. And Warner Brothers came in and said, actually, we like your style as a director. We think that you have a very clear visual eye. We think that you're an artistic filmmaker, and we think you're doing interesting things. How would you like to make a blockbuster with us, which will be the New Gods movie written by Tom King? And it's like, that's the sort of process that you see. And you see it happen, like, historically with people like, say, Stanley Kubrick, with people like Clint Eastwood, where it's like, one for you, one for me. It's like, sure, make us a Talking Ape movie, but then you can make your cool jazz man movie. Or, you know, make us, like, I don't know, another Dirty Harry movie, and you can maybe make, like, I don't know, the one where you're John Huston hunting animals in Africa. I don't know what that's about. We'll give you 80 million for it. Just go for it. Like, that's sort of like, or even Christopher Nolan more recently, like that kind of, that's always how I've seen the thing with Snyder. Snyder is basically the flip side of that coin, which is he was massively commercially successful for the studio. He managed to do something that the studio had wanted to do from like a simple business perspective, which is prove that R-rated comic book movies could succeed, which he did with 300, and prove that March was a viable place to put a blockbuster, because the summer months were getting increasingly crowded, and if you could push back or forward, that would be a great thing. And in doing so, my understanding of it is that he bought himself a lot of credit with the studio, and that credit naturally carried on through the flop of Watchmen, the success of Man of Steel financially speaking, and kind of ran out from under him with the didn't make $1 billion Batman versus Superman, let's replace him on Justice League. But that's how I've always kind of like seen Snyder's working from a logical perspective from Warner's.
Plus, to be fair, in the case of Justice League, his daughter died. Well, let's not forget that. That was
that's correct.
The thing about that is one of the big problems that and again, this is one of the things where it's like, I feel like I'm talking like with a moral authority that doesn't exist, which is like, I thought it was very tasteless to do that. What allegedly happened, which is he took a break after his daughter passed, and apparently the rumor was that was used by Warner Brothers to move in another director in his place.
Yeah,
which
that was nice.
Absolutely,
I found that incredibly tasteless, incredibly crass, and like, I mean, and part of me, and this is one of the things where it's like, this is a moral call for me, and it's like, I'm not pretending that anybody else has to agree with me, and I'm not saying that I'm right or anything like that, but just from my perspective, even admitting that his Justice League may not be a great movie or even necessarily a very good movie, I like the fact that after that happened, he's got a chance to do that. Being honest, it's not like a replacement. Yeah, like not many people do get that opportunity, and I mean, I don't imagine I'm not pretending it's a replacement or a balancing of the books or anything like that. And I mean, again, he probably has millions of dollars already. He doesn't need money or anything like that. But I as somebody who was like, I thought that was very tasteless and very crass. I feel like getting that chance to do it again, at least from his perspective, is fair. As weird as that sounds in this context, you know.
I can definitely be with you on two points here, which is one, yes, the way Warner Brothers treated him during a very down and stressful time for his family is awful, bar none. Two, he is an interesting filmmaker. His version of Justice League will be significantly more interesting than the version we got.
It will be a lot more Oedipal. That's my immediate guess. That's like no. I mean, like actually, seriously, right? Because like you have like in Batman, and again, this is the thing where it's like, okay, ha ha ha, Martha, isn't that hilarious that he did that? And it's like, yes, it is, but it's also very interesting because it means that when you get to Justice League, it's like, oh, he's talking to his mother's box. I wonder what's going on here. And it's like, I didn't think I'd see this much Freud in a superhero movie ever.
And the best part is, you know that he's not doing it on purpose. That's my favorite thing about him.
It's deep, man. It has so many levels. No, I don't know. I do feel like there's maybe a little bit of vaguely Jungian stuff sinking in at some level there. But yeah, again, like you could, like in no universe would anybody at Disney, and quite rightly, probably to be fair, to give credit where it's due, in no universe would anybody at Disney sign off on. So there's a very heavy Freudian Oedipal subtext in your superhero movie. Are you sure you want to do this? It's like, yeah, okay, that's it, yeah.
Yeah. Zack Snyder. I'm looking forward to it. I am honestly looking forward to his version of Justice League.
We also didn't talk about the Batman who fucks, actually.
Wait. I assume every Batman. I mean, he is a super ripped, incredibly rich and handsome dude. Batman fucks.
Counterpoint to that, I don't think that outside of The Dark Knight Rises, Christopher Nolan's Batman does not fuck, I would argue. I would suggest that like Nolan's Batman is very much presented as a virginal character. arguably in keeping with Nolan's general filmography, where his male
Well,
leads tend to
I
be
wouldn't say virginal. He has all the girls around him and everything, and he gets into all sorts of soirees sort of stuff. So it seems like he puts on a show at the very least that gets rather close to it, if nothing else.
Yeah, but again, like it's very much in that kind of like closeted sense that you have, where it's like he's presenting himself to the outer world. He's kind of pretending he's putting on a show.
I feel like that's just Nolan though. Nolan never has dipped into a bestial nature.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about imagining what a Nolan sex scene would be like.
Oh,
It's a very interesting thought experiment. That the Hans Zimmer bass just sort of thumping on the background. But no, I think that's genuine. Like, as somebody who is a Nolan scholar, I find that genuinely fascinating about basically his Batman, is the idea that like his Batman is celibate, and not like in the sexless way that kind of Marvel characters are, like Marvel Studios characters are, where they tend to have a girlfriend but there's no real sense of, ooh, look at how sexy time we're having together. More like in a, I have committed myself to this thing that I'm doing no matter what the cost, and that's what I'm doing, and everything else is completely secondary. And I love this girl, but I haven't told her that, and we're never going to act on it because that would therefore kind of like destroy the fantasy. I find that aspect of his Batman fascinating. Because he, like, the Burton Batman fucks. The Burton Batman is kinky as fuck.
Oh my goodness,
Hell yes.
He hooks up with Kim Basinger and then sleeps upside down afterwards, just let the blood get back to his head. Then, you have, like, the BDSM stuff that's going on with Catwoman and the Whip in sort of, like, in Batman Returns, where it's a little bit of blood play and he's into it, which is fascinating. Then you have, like, the kind of, like, the Batman Forever, which is a weird one, because Batman Forever is like, Batman's straight. In case you ever thought otherwise, we just want to let you know Batman is entirely straight. He's not into bondage because McDonald's were not into that when we did that with Batman Returns. He's instead going to date Nicole Kidman. She doesn't have any leather outfits. She doesn't have a whip. He's going to take her to the circus. She's going to wear a nice dress. They're going to adopt...
She does have a nightie and a wind machine, though.
Yeah. But, like, again, most stereotypically kind of, like, heterosexual, wholesome idea of romance natural.
Oh, it's soap opera. It's beautiful.
And they adopt a child together. So it's like, in case you didn't know Batman was straight and fucked women, it's like, well, okay, no, he's got Nicole Kidman and he's got a son now. This is as wholesome as it can possibly be. And then Batman and Robin happens. And Batman and Robin is amazing. Because Batman and Robin's basically like, all the stuff we did in Batman Forever to assure you that Batman's straight. And that Batman totally has sex with lots of women at every opportunity he can. We want you to just push that out of your mind. And what we want to do is we want to get back to the idea of Batman as a queer icon. Because, like, at its core, Batman and Robin is about Batman learning to open himself up to Dick. It is about basically Dick Grayson going to Batman and saying, you can't treat me as a child. I am not your son anymore. I am your, and this is the word from the film, partner. We are partners in this together. It's about accepting Alfred in particular, not as a servant or as an employee, but as a member of a family that is entirely male-driven. The only female character there are a couple of female characters that show up. You have Barbara, who's a schoolgirl, who is briefly introduced as a potential romantic interest for Robin, but at the end that drifts aside. And then you have Poison Ivy, and Poison Ivy is interesting because she seduces the men, but not through, like, romance or by looking like Uma Thurman, instead through the use of chemicals. She blows stuff in their faces and catches them off guard. You have moments where, like, after she seduced Robin, Batman grabs him and says, you're not thinking straight, Dick. And he turns around and he says, I am thinking straight, maybe for the first time. And it's like, well, now, that is a whole host of subtext right there.
I understand that meaning.
Yeah. And I mean, on top of that, you have, like, Mr. Freeze, who has literally frozen the 1950s heterosexual kind of heteronormative family unit on ice and is trying to revive that. And he's in opposition to Batman. Anyway, this is my hot take. So yeah, in terms of, like, Batman and sex, there's a lot there. I feel like just having him say the F word is going to be somewhat underwhelming, though, unless you actually play out that psychodrama, which I don't think we'll do.
Can I pull a weird thing that I also would like to say is, like, a good example of Batman, and actually when it comes to, like, getting intimate and stuff like that. I believe it was the Tom King. I always get Tom Taylor and Tom King swapped around in my head, but I believe it was the Tom King run. When he and Selena Kyle were actually getting serious, it was looking like they're going to be having a romance. Because before that run, someone had actually done a Batman and Catwoman sex scene.
This is Judd Winnick's infamous New 52 Catwoman number one thing where they fuck on the roof, right?
I I don't remember the numbers that precisely. I'm sorry. If it was Star Wars, I could do that for you, but I would have to Google to double check that.
Yeah.
But
I love that I go like, is it number 1 where they fuck on the roof? And Elijah goes, wait, I don't know if it was number 1.
what I remember is there was, before they ever did this scene, there was one where they tried to have a Batwoman and Catwoman scene, and they described it as being like a barroom brawl, and it's really bad on the consent. It really like.
Yeah.
Speaking about Batman being kinky, like that sort of stuff just is not there. It just is not reading well. Whereas when Tom King does it, it's this emotional vulnerability. It captures the thing about intimacy that I rarely see actually explored outside of like some of the more serious romantic comedies or stuff like that, where Batman is having to open up to someone and be vulnerable, be completely and utterly in every single way vulnerable to someone else. And it's one of the most emotionally touching things I've ever seen in a Batman story. Like, they are having sex, and they do lean into that, but like, it's more than just, it's like the difference between an action scene where thing go boom and an action scene where a character actually develops as a person. And I feel like we need that more, and I think that that's what we need from a Batman who fucks, not from a Batman who just yells.
We need a Batman who makes love. And again, I would second that Tom King reference or sort of like recommendation there as well. His run is absolutely
it's beautiful. It's so
good. It's really good.
No, and we're not going to get any of that here in Snyder. This is
you don't know that, Jack. You don't know. It might have an entire tender subplot.
Snyder. Like, remember when you were a teenager and you found out that you could do like taboo items and get a reaction out of people? We called them edgelords, right? Like, oh, I'm going to do something slightly taboo and get a reaction. Oh, look at all you norms reacting to me being taboo. This is another problem I have with Zack Snyder is he is an adult edgelord, and it's time to give it up, man. We don't care. Like, we have R-rated movies already. We don't need Batman to do that.
I just kind of love the idea that what pushes it, and again, this is one of those things where it's more just a comment on the weirdness of the rating system, where it's like, Batman can like break a thug's arm, leg, throw him into a dumpster, throw him off a building, get shot at, get brutally beaten as long as there's no blood. But at the moment that he says a naughty word, that's the point where it becomes R-rated. I always found that slightly surreal. It's very strange to me.
We have we still have bits of puritanical blood in us here.
Like one of my favorite details is like, you know, The Wolf of Wall Street, the kind of Martin Scorsese movie that has a lot of sex, a lot of cocaine use, a lot of foul language in it, and it was like, it was a hard R in the States. It was like an 18 certificate in the UK. My favorite detail was in the United Arab Emirates. It was an 18 certificate, but they removed all of the swear words and dirty scenes. So apparently it played like a really experimental movie because you cut out like a third of the movie. Characters like literally just move around the scene because they removed the F word from their dialogue. But like, despite all of that, it was rated 12s in France.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love it. I love it. All right. That was The Batman Who Fucks. A lovely segment. Also adding to the list of one-offs is we just need to have a good old talk about Batman and Robin. Because apparently Darren has a lot of thoughts on that.
Of thoughts.
And I'm okay with all of them. Let's move on now to our final segment, which is unfortunately about our current global pandemic, about business in general. This is a very business-heavy podcast. Less movies, more business.
I love that we have like Disney's business announcements, a Batman who gets down to business, and this.
And the business of being a bad boss. Very recently, Tom Cruise was caught on audio yelling at crew members on the latest Mission Impossible movie for not following COVID guidelines. Early rumors were that they were not wearing masks. There have been conflicting reports that they were just not properly distanced. We don't know all the particulars because, you know, just the audio of Tom Cruise yelling at someone went viral and everyone got excited because Tom Cruise was yelling at people. I'll start with me as I usually do. I am of two thoughts here, which is one that is absolutely unacceptable, an unacceptable way to treat your employees. Tom Cruise is producer and executive producer of the movie. Those are his employees. You should never yell at your employees like that. That's just bad management.
You should never yell at people like that. just in general.
But see, that's the other part of me where it's like, I want to yell at people who are not following COVID guidelines properly. I want that. And so, like, that bit of escapism for me was like, ooh, I want Tom Cruise to yell at people who aren't properly following COVID guidelines. So, like, I'm very like, ooh, I want both, you know?
Yeah, no, it is. It's one of those things. And I mean, it's notable that you've had this kind of discussion that's come out of it, where you had people like Whoopi Goldberg and George Clooney, say basically, yeah, the way that he did it was wrong, but the point that he was making was maybe not unreasonable, which was the idea that yeah, when you're working in an environment like that, you need to be very, very careful. And again, this
Mhm.
is one of those situations where it feels like almost having this argument is stupid because so many, like, the problem is much, much bigger than this makes it out to be, which is like
Mhm.
Cruz, like, if you listen to the rant, and it's a very passionate rant, and like, again, never talk to your employees like that. That's completely unacceptable as a boss, and no matter
Yes.
what job you're working at. Like, even if, like, no, and I mean, never yell to anybody in any professional capacity like that, even if you're, say, a customer at a McDonald's or anything like that. That is a completely unacceptable way to talk to somebody who is probably not earning a great deal of money, who's probably working below the line, and over whom you have a huge amount of power. So don't do that. Absolutely do
Right.
not do that before we get onto the next bit. But like, the thing about that is that, like, he talks in that rant about how we are basically providing jobs, we are keeping roofs over people's head, we're allowing them to continue to pay the mortgage, we're paying their college tuition. It's because of what we're doing here that other films are able to do that, and as other films are able to do that, the staff on those other films are also able to pay their rent and their education, and presumably when we release these films that we're making now, cinemas will have staff, and those staff will be able to pay their mortgages, buy food, and that sort of thing. And it's like, all of that stuff is a very valid point, but it's also maybe a suggestion of a much bigger problem here, which is we've seen like that and again, this is one of the things where we are a movie podcast, so we talk about this with movies. I'm fairly sure it happens in other industries as well. As
Yeah.
movies have gone back into shooting continually, and as TV shows as well, we've seen a number of situations where they've started shooting and had to stop shooting because of COVID outbreaks on set. To bring it all back, it happened with the Batman. Like, they were back, I think, all of 3 days before Robert Pattinson discovered he was wearing the wrong type of mask on the set, so to speak. I'm sorry, that was flippant. I should have done that, but you know what I mean. Same thing happened with...
Mask.
Yeah,
I get
yeah.
no, I get it.
Yeah, no. I worked really hard for that one. And then there's also, like, the Jurassic Park one as well, where I think shooting stopped 2 or 3 times while they were filming Jurassic World Dominion, because, again, they had COVID outbreaks on the set. Vikings Valhalla, which is shooting down in Ardmore, down here in Ireland, had a similar pause in production when a test came back positive. And it's like, maybe if this is happening, it is too early for you to be doing this. But at the same time, you're like, but if you don't do this, then people will end up unemployed because you can't put it on ice and start again because of the nature of how governments, rather than people or rather than industries, are dealing with
That's
this.
the thing. Like, the bigger conversation is we live in a world, at least here in America, where we don't have a social safety net to fall back on when something like this bad like this happens. To me, like, yes, the larger problem is the fact that we are so reliant on industries continuing to grind forward even through amazing adversity.
Yeah, like, I mean, to pick an example from Ireland, right? I love cinema, so I'm a big fan of cinema, and like, we've reopened twice. We've reopened, and then we were open for a couple months. We went into lockdown again, and we've just come out. And what I found is the Irish-owned cinema chains, and those are these cinema chains that can take advantage of the Irish social security net, are generally doing okay, because when they shut down, they furlough their staff, and the government covers something like 80% of their wages, which is exactly what a government should do in a situation like this, without making me sound like I'm wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt. Like, we're Ireland, we're a tax haven. We are not a particularly leftist nation. We are not like Cuba. We are not even Scandinavia. Like, this is not a radical concept. But what's happened is the chains that are managed by overseas brands, particularly, say, Cineworld, which is managed by Regal, which is an American brand, they've shut down and they haven't reopened. And they haven't reopened because they're incorporated in America, and America doesn't have those same robust security protections. So it's either keep open and keep churning content and keep convincing people to go out, even when it's not safe for them to go out, because you need to pay them, or they need to get paid rather. Not you need to pay them, but they need to get paid in order to like continue paying rent, because people are still claiming rent, and because there's no rent support out there, and like it's a perpetual cycle, and it's really depressing. And I know this is a movie podcast. I know this is not the place for it, but like when I heard Cruise's rant, part of me is like how messed up is the global economy right now? That like Tom Cruise, and like I have mixed feelings about Tom Cruise. I think he's actually a really good actor, to give him credit, and I think that he's a really good screen presence. I think that what I know of him as a person gives me very serious pause, but let's put that aside. Let's not talk about that. How messed up are things right now that Tom Cruise can say reasonably that like the fate of thousands of jobs is resting on his ability to make Mission Impossible 7 in the middle of a global pandemic. How screwed up must things be in the world that Tom Cruise is literally the lifeline for thousands of people? And I mean, it's hilarious and it's silly, but it's also terrifying.
How about this, Darren? Let's double down on that. Tom Cruise is a certifiable weirdo.
Yeah,
he
okay,
is
yeah.
like the figurehead of like a weird religion that everyone makes fun of except for people who are in it.
People who are afraid of being sued by it.
And people who are afraid of being sued by it. Luckily, we're not that big.
John Travolta will be hosting next week's Escapist Movie Podcast.
Oh, if only we could just talk about Face Off. It would be great.
Gotti.
The rumors about his several relationships, how they have played out in a more business-like way. No, he's a crazy weirdo. And even beyond that, like, he is the bourgeoisie, yet we are all here saying, yes, it's kind of good that he yelled at his employees, right? Like, that's how messed up this situation is. So it's like any other year, if like when Christian Bale yelled at the lighting guy for getting lights in his eyes, right?
Yeah. We were like, just make the dance remix and acknowledge that he's an asshole. And it's like, yeah, that's it, we can move on.
We all made the joke. The famous rich actor yelled at someone on the crew, like, haha, what a dickhead actor.
Yeah.
Here we're like, well, maybe he's got a point. Like, that's the crazy world we are living in right now, is I have to defend Tom Cruise.
Do you have to, Jack? Do you have to?
I feel like I do, and I posted a little flippant Twitter thing, and I've gotten a lot of blowback, and a lot of people like to take the stance that this is more Tom Cruise's ego. And while I don't deny that some of it is definitely ego-driven, Tom Cruise is a figurehead of Hollywood. They follow by his example, both from a star stature side and as a producer side. He is helping to set a standard for how business can continue, and that is undeniable. So while it might be a little egotistical that he says thousands of jobs rely on him, thousands of jobs actually rely on him.
That's it. Like I think it's more absurd that it's not nonsense. Like it's more absurd. Right. It's not like, it would be absurd if he said it and it weren't true, but it's somehow even more absurd that he said it and it kind of is true.
Yeah.
No, it's absolutely true. He is paying those salaries. He is not only is he paying those salaries.
Bought that $600,000 cruise ship, and I love that it's a Tom Cruise ship.
Right? But like, not only that, is if his film is able to stay safe and follow protocols, that will give confidence to other films to follow protocols and stay safe, keeping the business moving. Yeah. He is important to this. And so like, to me, that's but it's crazy. It's a crazy situation. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Elijah. Sorry, you look like we've been yelling. Myself and Jack have been yelling at each other.
For me, in this particular instance, it's like, I actually kind of broke down about this in a column a while back when I was talking about this really weird old Xbox exclusive game, Vampire Reign. Most people hate it. It is a very punishing game. It looks like you're going to be a Tom Clancy badass, and it's like, yeah, except every vampire can kill you in basically one hit. So actually, your gun's not worth anything. Sneak around everybody. But it made me realize it's how it feels right now, where I am in the middle of the pandemic, because no one around here wears masks. Everyone around here denies basically everything.
Oh,
I am
wow.
deep in red territory right now, and
Sorry.
I can go up the road a little bit of ways, and there are crazy signs saying that Pelosi needs to be hanged or something like that. Just like that is
Sure,
what I
sure.
drive by whenever we need to go to the freaking grocery store. And
Mm.
it is exhausting. It is emotionally, well, morally exhausting because I know that people are actually glaring at my family and stuff because we're wearing masks so that we don't get anything and so that we don't give them anything. So I
Right.
can kind of understand breaking down and going, oh my gosh, this is bigger than if you're got a little scratchy itchiness on your nose or something. Wear a mask
Yeah.
properly. It's not that hard. Some of us have our hands ripping open because of how many times we've had to wash them because our skin is that
Yeah.
dry. You can stand to wear a mask. It's not a lot, people.
No, I think like that's the part of it with Tom Cruise here, where it's like there is a bit of catharsis in just like being able to hear someone else yell at someone, like get that emotional release of like, yes, listen to Tom Cruise, listen to someone who has that poise and presence, follow the dang rules. Absolutely.
Yeah. Again, I feel like I've been very, very lucky here because we had like we came out in June, July, and around then I noticed that there was about 30% of people wearing masks, which was far, far, far too low, and may have contributed to us going back into lockdown. And we came out, I think, about 2 weeks ago now, and I've been out in public a couple of times, and it's 100%. Everybody's wearing masks, which is remarkable. And again, maybe that's why I have that kind of distance from it, where I don't know what the culture is. I don't have I talk to people and they say nobody's wearing masks, and it's absurd to me because it's like we 30% of us were wearing masks, and then things got so bad that we went into lockdown for 2 months, and now we're wearing masks again, and we learned our lesson from this. And it's insane. It's crazy.
You're totally fair. It makes no sense, and it's
Right.
in part that's just an issue of rural America in general, is that it's
Yeah.
very hard to convince people to change things. These are people who like tradition. They will fight
Mm.
tooth and nail for as simple as, well, you know how we have an annual fair every year? What if we had a dance hall? People will fight you tooth and nail for that. I speak from experience. They do not like changing things, and in some ways I
Yeah.
understand that because they're very used to things being rotational and stuff like that, but there are circumstances where they just won't trust anything, and they basically have
Mhm.
locked themselves in. It's part of what is just the issue with America in general, in that we're
I,
so determined to be
Mhm.
right, so determined to say that what I think is fact, regardless of what the facts actually are, that
Mhm.
as was said earlier, it's like competitive sports teams. The same thing that happens with IP is now happening with politics. Everything is becoming a game to people,
yeah.
except for ironically
Yeah.
video games, in which case you get an angry hate mob because you like the video game a little bit.
People have the right priorities, Elijah. They've got to decide what really matters here.
I know, right?
And that's a Devil May Cry sequel. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
I have nothing else to add to that. It's an insane world right now.
Yeah. That wasn't a clause; it was a sentence.
That exactly. It's an insane world, and Tom Cruise should not yell at people.
Yes, and so certainly
No
not yell at
boss.
people who have less power than him to be. Yeah,
Right. No boss should yell at their employees. Is I guess what
it's great.
that's the statement is that. But there is a bit of catharsis in anyone yelling at anyone else not following COVID guidelines.
I'm now imagining Mission Impossible 7, where its big kind of romantic wish fulfillment thing is just Ethan Hunt running around randomly yelling at people while doing his Tom Cruise
Wear a
run.
mask!
Oh, I
my
would
God.
love that. I would love that. So just give me a short. Make that the trailer, and you got a ticket sold.
Because I know, like, that's the thing about Cruise, actually. And this is one of the things, again, we're coming near the end, so I'll talk very quickly about this. One of the things I actually find fascinating about Cruise as a performer is the way in which he's managed to. We talked about how modern fandom has moved away from individuals and towards IPs, and towards companies, even, and towards brands, and towards kind of, you're no longer a fan of a filmmaker, you're now a fan of a property. And what I found interesting about Cruise is arguably one of the few celebrities, maybe Will Smith, who's managed to navigate the shift away from movie stardom to IP stardom. Because think about it, like, Chris Evans wasn't a star, but Captain America is a star, or, Chris Hemsworth can't open a movie on his own, but Thor is a big deal, that sort of stuff. And what Cruise has managed to do, and particularly with the Mission Impossible films, is despite hitting a career low in his no good, very bad year in 2006, the couch jumping year, the year that Paramount cancelled the contract with him. I think it was around the time that video of him like giving that Scientology, "You're a Scientologist and you know you're the only one who can help" speech went public as well. The moment at which I think the silent birth rumors entered there as well. That was like Tom Cruise's nadir, and that was the point a couple of years before Iron Man, and the suggestion that Cruise was almost but not quite Iron Man as well. And what he's done in recent years, which I found interesting, and you can see it from Mission Impossible 4 onwards, and arguably Mission Impossible 3 as well, is he's managed to make himself the brand. Tom Cruise is inseparable from the brand of the Mission Impossible movies. To the point where, like, the opening scene of Mission Impossible 3 is not, gee, look at this cool action thing that's happening. It's, geez, wouldn't it be nice to go to a party and have a conversation with Tom Cruise? I know he doesn't drink as an actor, but he seems like a guy he'd be really cool to have a beer with. Or like you have like Greg Gunberg during that sequence go, he's a nice guy, but he's so boring. Which is like pretty much exactly what Cruise wanted the public to think when they were hearing crazy rumors about him insisting that his wife give birth in silence. It's like, I wish people thought I was boring and nice. And then you get to like the more recent kind of Mission Impossible movies where you have like Mission Impossible Fallout, where like the entire plot of Mission Impossible Fallout is Ethan Hunt is confronting the ex-wife who was arguably like scarred by the horrible things that happened because of her association with him, and going to her and taking responsibility for that and acknowledging that maybe he wasn't the husband that he needed, but he's actually a good guy underneath it all. And like you get this real packaging of Tom Cruise as a brand when you watch these movies, where it's like, we're not just selling you Ethan Hunt, we're not just selling you Mission Impossible. Cruise is very much like, yes, I am inseparable from it, to the point where, like, do you know how the last Mission Impossible was designed as a movie? And I love this story. So Christopher McQuarrie, who wrote and directed Mission Impossible 6, Mission Impossible Fallout, he also did Rogue Nation as well. Apparently what happened is Tom Cruise rang him up and said, "Hey, Chris, I'm learning how to fly a helicopter. That should be in the movie." And apparently that is literally how Fallout happened, because he was like, okay, Tom Cruise wants to fly a helicopter. That's going to be the climax of the movie, because that's got to be our big moment. So logically, let me think about this. We have to go to a country that will allow Tom Cruise to fly a helicopter for insurance purposes. So that narrows down the number of choices we can go. We can go to New Zealand. Let's go to New Zealand, and we can say it's Nepal. So that means that at the end of the movie, the character has to go to Nepal, and then works backwards and designs the movie from that, which I kind of adore. Like,
beautiful.
It's amazing how Cruise has basically navigated that shift from movie stardom to intellectual property stardom by basically going, I am the intellectual property.
You know what that is, Darren? That's problem solving right there.
I know, it's the most direct approach. Well, you could argue Will Smith has tried to do that. Like, remember Gemini Man, which was the one last year? Ang Lee, from the director of The Life of Pi and The Ice Storm, comes the movie where Will Smith faces a CGI younger version of himself. But, like, if you look at Gemini Man is basically Will Smith as movie star versus intellectual property, which is CGI version of young, hip Will Smith. And it's like, can we play out your midlife crisis or your anxiety about your fate as a movie star on screen more directly? And he's like, I don't think we can. It's like, okay, we've done it.
Then we've done it, yeah.
I mean, After Earth, it just is kind of established that Will Smith likes to make, this is a Will Smith movie. Not a movie starring Will Smith. This is a Will Smith movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would argue, like, again, I'm not a huge fan of Guy Ritchie's Aladdin, but I think that, like, arguably Smith is the only character who could have played the genie, because the genie is the only character in the Disney canon who is tied to a movie star rather than to a character, in that when you think of Genie, you think of Robin Williams. In that, like, Genie is Robin Williams. Like, in Aladdin, he does impersonations of, like, Jack Nicholson, which makes no sense. Like, you have fans who will, like, bend over backwards and say, oh, but obviously Aladdin takes place in a post-apocalyptic world, and obviously, like, it takes place long afterwards, so Jack Nicholson's, like, a historical figure to them. That's why he's able to do Jack Nicholson impersonation. Like, no, he's doing a Jack Nicholson impersonation because it's Robin Williams.
Oh, yeah,
like,
there's an entire reel of, like, unfinished animatics where it's just, like, all the different takes he did, and it's beautiful, because all of them worked. They could just slot them in.
Yeah.
I am more interested in the fact that someone is trying to justify a reality that an animated Disney musical could exist in real life. That to me is the most absurd
Jack,
part of this
no, it gets deeper than that. Oh yeah, we don't have time to get into Pixar theory right now.
You thought Star Wars continuity was bad. Like, there's an entire debate about whether or not Genie's lamp allows him to experience the entirety of time and space, and that's why he's making 90s pop culture.
He's the Infinity Stone as a person.
Yeah, which again gets into this idea of like transforming a movie star into intellectual property. When it's like, no, the thing about Genie and what makes Genie wonderful in the Disney canon is that he is Robin Williams. Like, he's a movie star. And so when you get Guy Ritchie's Aladdin from 2018, 2019, the only conceivable movie star you could have done that with, I would argue, was Will Smith. And I'm not a huge fan of the movie, but I think that casting made sense. And again, that's an example of Smith trying to find a way to be a movie star in a post-movie star world.
I like it. I think there's no better place to wrap up, mostly because we're out of time.
Sorry.
So, no, I think that's great. I think these were deep and good discussions. Obviously, this podcast was a little more on the business side of things instead of just talking about a movie structure, narrative. Who cares about that? There's money to be made.
In post.
I want to see the Snyder cut of this podcast. Actually, all of us are shirtless and shot from low angles. There are no medium shots. It's just wide shots and intense close-ups.
Hold on, let me put the sepia filter on this and up the contrast, and we're good to go.
Yeah, slow motion, perhaps.
It's the only thing he's known for. Ha-ha! All right. Well, hey, thanks everyone for listening and or watching this. Once again, my name has been Jack Packard.
I've been Darren Mooney.
I may still be Elijah Beahm.
But we'll never know.